ever get that feeling. Like you're bumping up against a really cool idea, something that could like totally shift your perspective, but then the explanation just kind of lets you down. Like it's assuming you can't handle the good stuff.
Right, like they're holding back on you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not what we're about here.
Not at all.
You guys send in Sam Harris's Waking Up, and it's clear you're grappling with some pretty big questions about consciousness and, this whole idea of the self.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
And you want the core insights. No fluff, no hand-holding.
Just straight to the point.
You got it. So today, we're diving deep into Waking Up, but with you in the driver's seat. You set the course, we navigate.
That's a good analogy.
Thanks.
So, essentially, you're looking for the essence of Harris's exploration into spirituality, but without, all the religious baggage.
Right. Like, what does it actually tell us about consciousness and this idea of the self being an illusion?
Exactly. And we're going to treat you like the smart cookie you are.
We're no dumbing it down here.
We're going deep, aiming for those aha moments.
Love it. Okay, so Waking Up covers a lot of ground, right?
A lot.
From meditation to psychedelics, even like the downsides of guru culture. But the core, the real meat of it seems to be this whole dismantling of the self.
Oh, absolutely.
And what consciousness actually is.
Yeah, the big questions.
So our mission.
Our mission.
Unpack Harris's arguments on these points.
With precision.
And hopefully spark some of those aha moments for you along the way.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, let's get right into it. This idea of the self being an illusion.
This is like the cornerstone of so much of Harris's work.
Fundamental.
He's pulling from ancient contemplative wisdom. But his central argument,
lay it on me.
This feeling we all have, of being a continuous self, the separate me.
Yeah, that me all the time.
Exactly. He says it's not a fundamental reality. It's a construct, an illusion.
Whoa.
I know, right?
So, how did he even come to this idea?
Well, there's this really interesting story he tells about a wilderness solo retreat he did as a young guy.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He spent 3 weeks completely alone in the mountains. At first, his mind was just full of, everyday thoughts.
Like, what am I going to eat?
Yeah, craving a decent meal, boredom, that kind of thing. But then something shifted.
Like a breakthrough.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is that it wasn't some gradual emotional thing.
Huh.
Not like he suddenly felt, overflowing with love or anything.
So what was it then?
He describes it as a logical realization, like suddenly understanding a mathematical proof.
Wow.
And through that, he glimpsed something profound about the underlying universality of emotions, like love and compassion.
Okay, so walk me through that.
So it wasn't about him becoming more loving, right?
Right.
It was more like this sense of a separate me that normally filters our experience. It just dissolved.
Like poof.
Basically.
Mm.
And what he realized was that love, compassion, these qualities, they were always there. Some traditions call it a state of being, this underlying inherent goodness.
Interesting.
But that illusion of a separate self, it acts as a barrier. It obscures it.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
And what's cool is, Harris realized this wasn't just a subjective thing. He could actually point others towards a similar experience.
Oh.
Just by asking a simple question.
Okay, what's the question?
How would you feel in the presence of a complete stranger?
Huh, that's a good one.
Right? And he found that often it would reveal this inherent, boundless nature of positive emotions, without all the self-centered stuff getting in the way.
So taking this a step further, Harris talks about consciousness without self.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
It sounds almost paradoxical.
It does. But the idea is that if you really pay attention right now in this moment,
yeah,
and you try to find that persistent self, that voice in your head.
A narrator.
Exactly. It's surprisingly hard to pin down.
You're right. When you actually try to find it, it's kind of slippery.
It is. All you find is this constant flow of thoughts, feelings, sensations.
Coming and going.
Arising and passing.
But is there, an actual entity that's experiencing all of this?
That's the question. It's like trying to find the filmmaker inside the movie.
Uh-huh.
All you see is the film itself, the
Yes.
images, the sounds.
That's a great analogy.
So, to really illustrate this point, Harris talks about the work of Douglas Harding.
Okay, I've heard of him. The headless perspective, right?
That's the one.
This is where it gets trippy.
It does, but in a good way. Harding offers a really direct way to experience this non-duality of consciousness.
Non-duality, meaning the absence of a separate self.
Exactly. And his main instruction is so simple. It's almost deceptively simple.
All right, I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me.
He says, look for your head.
Look for your head. Okay.
So when you actually do that right now, from your point of view, what do you see?
I see. Well, I see everything around me, but I don't see my head.
Exactly. You see the world appearing in this, like, boundless clarity. But the head you expect to be there, it's absent.
Whoa.
It's wild, right? He describes it as this total absence where you anticipate a head,
Yeah.
and it's replaced by this sense of unbounded clarity.
So it's not like my head literally disappears.
No, not literally.
It's more like the absence of that feeling of a separate self.
Exactly, right at the center of your experience.
Now, I know Harris mentions that Douglas Hofstadter, another big thinker,
Yeah, brilliant guy.
he wasn't really buying this, called it childishly solipsistic.
Yeah, he wasn't a fan.
But what Harris emphasizes, and I think this is really important, is that Harding's instruction, it's empirical.
It's an experiment.
You're not asked to believe anything. You're just invited to, like, investigate your own experience.
Try it out.
And he uses this really cool analogy, the window and the mirror.
Oh, I love that one.
So when you look at a window, right,
Yeah.
you can either see through it to the world
To
outside,
view
or you can see your own reflection staring back at you.
your own face.
And it's so easy to switch back and forth between these two.
Super easy.
But you can't really focus on both at the same time.
Nope.
And this is how our attention usually works, right? We're either focused outward on the content of our experience,
The thoughts, the sensations,
or we're focused inward on this assumed self.
this me at the center of it all.
And Harding's saying basically stop using the window as a mirror.
Just see what's right there,
The open, clear awareness without the self.
right on the surface.
And it seems so obvious, right? But it's actually really hard to do.
Our habits of mind are powerful.
So we've talked about the illusory self. Now, let's get into the nature of consciousness itself.
The main event.
How does Harris define it?
Well, he's very careful to distinguish between spirituality and religion,
Yeah, that's key.
especially for, scientifically minded folks like yourself.
Skeptics welcome.
For Harris, spirituality isn't about dogma or believing in, like, supernatural stuff.
No blind faith required.
It's about the effort we make to understand consciousness directly
Through experience.
through experience.
Empirical.
Exactly. And one of the core practices he highlights is mindfulness.
Often called sati in Buddhist tradition.
Right. And he defines it as clear awareness,
Being present.
being present. And what's important to understand is that mindfulness, as he presents it, is empirical.
Evidence-based.
Totally. It's about paying attention in a non-judgmental way to the present moment, observing your thoughts, feelings, sensations as they come and go,
Noticing.
noticing.
Yeah.
The Buddhists break it down into 4 areas of focus: the body, feelings, the mind itself, and then all sorts of mental and physical phenomena.
So it's a pretty comprehensive system.
It is. But the key takeaway here,
Hit me.
you don't have to adopt any specific beliefs. You don't have to take anything on faith.
It's just a technique,
A tool, precisely. And it's a technique for addressing a very common problem,
which is...
the wandering mind.
Oh, yeah.
That constant chatter.
Hey, what am I doing? Where am I going? What's for dinner?
Exactly. And Harris links this to what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or the DMN.
DMN.
It's basically the brain's inner narrator, always telling stories about you, ruminating on the past, worrying about the future.
I have that voice all too well.
And what Harris explains is that when we intentionally direct our attention outward, when we become present,
When we're in the moment,
the activity in this DMN actually decreases.
it calms down.
Exactly. It's like the spotlight of awareness shifts
Mm-hmm.
away from that internal chatter.
That's so interesting. And this leads to another important distinction he makes
Oh, yeah, this is big.
between fleeting pleasures and a deeper, more lasting well-being.
2 very different things.
We're constantly chasing things that offer us temporary satisfaction,
New phone, new car, new job.
but those are by definition temporary.
Fleeting.
And true well-being, according to Harris, comes from understanding the nature of our own minds.
From recognizing the illusion.
the illusion of the self.
Exactly.
Now, to really dig into this, Harris brings up some fascinating neuroscience. Things like the split brain phenomenon.
Oh, right, from Roger Sperry's work. Fascinating stuff.
Can you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. So basically, in these split brain cases, the connection between the 2 hemispheres of the brain is severed.
Surgically.
Yeah. And what they found is that the brain can potentially support multiple independent centers of consciousness.
What?
Yeah, it's wild. Each hemisphere can have its own memories, its own learning, even its own intentions.
And the other side doesn't know.
It seems that way, like there's no communication between them.
That challenges our whole idea of having a single unified mind.
Totally. It suggests that this feeling of I, this seamless unity, it might be more of a construction than a fundamental truth.
So it's not that there are actually two me's.
Right. It's that this idea of a single me might be an oversimplification.
That's mind-blowing. And this leads Harris to this idea of the intrinsic selflessness of consciousness,
The deep dive.
which is a mouthful.
It is. But the point is, this feeling of I, this sense of being the thinker of our thoughts, the experiencer of our experiences,
The one who's always there.
it's not an essential feature of the mind. It's a feeling,
Yeah.
a powerful feeling, but still just a feeling.
So consciousness can exist without this I.
That's what Harris argues.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. How do we even begin to explore this for ourselves?
That's where meditation comes in.
Right, but not meditation as like some mystical ritual.
No,
More like a mental training.
exactly. A deliberate way to transform our perception.
Harris talks about awakening from the dream of discursive thought.
Beautiful way to put it.
Like realizing that our thoughts aren't reality.
They're just thoughts.
And the goal isn't necessarily to achieve some blissful state, right?
Not necessarily, although those states can arise.
It's more about uncovering a deeper, more fundamental well-being.
That's inherent to our own minds.
And he mentions various approaches to meditation, like self-inquiry, as taught by Ramana Maharshi.
Oh yeah, self-inquiry. That's a powerful one.
What's the gist of it?
Basically, you focus your attention on the feeling of I.
You keep asking, who am I?
Exactly. And through that constant questioning, you start to see the illusory nature of the self.
The ego dissolves.
Like a mirage.
And then there's Dzogchen, which seems a bit different. It emphasizes this direct introduction to the experience of self-transcendence.
Yeah, Dzogchen is more about direct experience, less about intellectual understanding,
It aims to bypass all the conceptual stuff.
and just point you directly to the nature of reality.
No self to transcend.
Precisely. And Harris found the teachings of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche particularly helpful in this regard.
Now, something I really appreciate about Harris is that he doesn't shy away from critiquing traditional spirituality.
Oh, he's definitely not afraid to call out the BS.
Like the whole guru phenomenon.
Yeah, that can be a tricky area.
He acknowledges the potential for harm and abuse in those relationships.
The power dynamics can get really skewed.
And he even mentions specific examples, like Gurdjieff, Rajneesh, Chogyam Trungpa.
Figures who, weren't always on the up and up.
So it's a cautionary tale. Just because someone claims to be enlightened,
Doesn't mean they are.
and you don't have to blindly follow anyone.
Critical thinking is key.
He also addresses the whole near-death experience thing.
NDEs.
People often use them as proof of an afterlife.
But Harris is pretty skeptical.
He points out the scientific flaws in those arguments
And the fact that there are alternative explanations.
that are more grounded in our current understanding of the brain.
So it's not about denying people's experiences.
Right. It's about being cautious about jumping to conclusions.
And maintaining a rational perspective.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Harris also talks about the spiritual uses of pharmacology.
The psychedelic realm.
He's talking about things like LSD, psilocybin, DMT,
Powerful substances.
and he acknowledges that they can reliably alter consciousness.
Big time.
People often report profound mystical experiences,
Feelings of unity, interconnectedness, transcendence.
but Harris is careful to point out that these experiences, however intense, don't necessarily equal lasting wisdom.
You can have a profound
And
experience.
to still be a jerk.
Exactly. And he also addresses Aldous Huxley's idea of the brain as a filter.
That psychedelics might remove this filter, allowing us to perceive more of reality.
It's an interesting idea. But Harris also presents the counterargument
Which is,
that brain damage generally impairs cognition, it doesn't enhance it.
right. So psychedelics might be showing us something real.
Or they might just be messing with our brains.
More research needed.
Absolutely. But the potential is there. And Harris emphasizes the need for ethical guidelines.
This isn't about reckless experimentation.
It's about approaching these substances with respect and careful consideration.
Okay, so bringing all this together, what's the takeaway? What's the path forward?
Well, Harris argues that genuine self-transcendence is possible
We can break free from the illusion.
and experience greater well-being, less suffering, more clarity,
And we don't have to become monks to do it.
or subscribe to any dogma.
The key is to recognize the nature of our thoughts,
And to gradually awaken from this illusion of a separate self.
to understand that our thoughts and feelings, they're not who we are.
They're just events in consciousness.
And as we see this more clearly, we can start to loosen the grip of the ego.
And experience a deeper sense of peace and connection.
And ultimately, Harris is arguing for a kind of spirituality that's grounded in reason and science.
Moving beyond the limitations of traditional religion.
So, to sum up, based on your interest in waking up,
Let's recap.
the feeling of a separate self, it's probably an illusion.
A cognitive construct.
But through practices like mindfulness and self-inquiry, we can start to see through this illusion.
We can investigate the nature of consciousness directly
And meditation can help us step back from that constant stream of thoughts.
and uncover a deeper well-being.
But it's important to approach all of this with a critical mind.
Be wary of gurus and claims that lack evidence.
Even with psychedelics, proceed with caution.
And always, always question your assumptions.
So it all comes down to your own experience.
Your own investigation.
No need for blind faith, just curiosity and a willingness to look closely.
With an open mind.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Something to chew on.
If this idea of the self being an illusion is true, how might that change your experience of the world?
How might it change your relationships?
What possibilities might open up when that grip of the ego starts to loosen?
It's an ongoing exploration.
And we encourage you to continue it
In your own way.
in your own time.
On your own terms.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.